wants to cry or pity me can come down and do a few of those, and then you may pity me.
46-year-old father of 3 young children told me he has few regrets and has achieved so many of his goals. Walking in zero gravity, designing a theme park ride for Disney, and helping to develop Alice, the university's popular computer software project that allows regular folks to easily create 3D animations. Professor Pausch reminded his audience that it sometimes takes a while to see the good in people.
So I find myself on the phone with a guy named John Snoddy, who is one of the most impressive guys I have ever met. One of the things he told me was that wait long enough and people will surprise and impress you. He said when you're pissed off at somebody and you're angry at them, you just haven't given them enough time. Just give them a little more time and they'll almost always impress you. And that really stuck with me. I think he's absolutely right on that.
Throughout his lecture, Professor Pausch spoke of the benefits of tenacity. Experience, he said, is what you get when you don't get what you want.
When I was a kid, I was 8 years old, and our family took a trip cross country to see Disneyland. And I just thought this was just the coolest environment I'd ever been in. And instead of saying, gee, I want to experience this, I said, I want to make stuff like this. And so I bided my time, and then I graduated with my PhD from Carnegie Mellon, thinking that meant me infinitely qualified to do anything. And I dashed off my letters of application to Walt Disney Imagineering, and they sent me some of the damn nicest go-to-hell letters I've ever gotten. Now think about the fact that you're getting this from a place that's famous for guys who sweep the street, right? So that was a bit of a setback. But remember, the brick walls are there for a reason. Right? The brick walls are not there to keep us out. The brick walls are there to give us a chance to show how badly we want something. Because the brick walls are there to stop the people who don't want it badly enough. They're there to stop the other people.
Professor Pausch asked the audience to encourage their kids' creativity. He had written mathematical formulas on the walls of his childhood bedrooms. And his parents didn't care if it hurt the home's resale value. They let him be the master of his own domain.
And the great thing about this is they let you do it. And then you get upset about it, and it's still there. If you go to my parents' house, it's still there. And anybody who's out there who is a parent, if your kids want to paint their bedroom, as a favor to me, let them do it. It'll be okay. Don't worry about resale value on the house.
Professor Pausch says more of us should think about what we would say if it was our last chance to say it. As he sees it, it's a gift you can give not just to other people, but also to yourself.
It's not about how to achieve your dreams, but how to lead your life. If you lead your life the right way, the karma will take care of itself. The dreams will come to you.
I'm Jeff Daslow, moving on compass for the personal journal.
So just a little bit after that, Professor Pausch did in fact die, and it was really kind of amazing what he left us, right? I mean, it's how you live your life, is what he said. And so that idea that Covey talks about one of the 4 roles of leadership is modeling, is the key issue. That's the one thing that you really can work on all the time, no matter what you're up to, in terms of that issue of leadership. So we'll talk a lot about that. Covey said that there are these 4 roles of leadership, and that the 3 of those roles, pathfinding, aligning, and empowering, are all roles that relate to the issue of trust. Now, when I worked for Covey, one of the things that they had me do was a trust workshop. And I don't know how many of you have ever gone to a trust workshop or a collaboration workshop. How many of you have ever done this here in the room? Gone to a workshop about collaboration or trust or whatever. It's really kind of a fun thing when you know that it's going to be a trust workshop and you walk in the room as a facilitator and you watch people without moving any part of their body but their eyes, they're looking around. But here's what they're really doing. I'm really glad you're here because you need this trust workshop. And I can't believe you actually showed up because you are the one who should be, and everyone's always pointing away from themselves. In the first 10 minutes of that workshop, Covey's great wisdom comes out. He says, you know what? If you're in a situation where people don't trust you, you've got to ask yourself a deeper question. Am I living a trustworthy life 100% of the time? And if I'm not, then I shouldn't expect anyone to trust me, anyone to follow me, if you will. So the 4th role of leadership, modeling, is based on that notion that trustworthiness is the foundation of trust and the essential thing we can do at all times. In the latest conceptualization from the Covey leadership people, they're saying that these are really what you're trying to accomplish as a leader. Through pathfinding to clarify purpose, aligning systems, unleashing talent is the notion of empowering, and then all of that to inspire trust so that people can move forward with you. So Covey's son said in his book, The Speed of Trust, that leadership is getting results in a way that does inspire trust. It's really interesting to me as a human being how where we are most comfortable is on the edges of a two-part dichotomy. You know, we are either into getting results as a leader or we're interested in having relationships that are good with people. But that paradox is where the answer always is, right? It's getting results in a way that inspires trust is what the issue is, that I think is the important issue. Now, just to kind of make this point with you, Jim Collins in his book in 2001, where he's talking about going from good to great, talked about these 8 issues that have to be employed simultaneously by any organization that wants to move from being good to being great. And the first one is called Level 5 Leadership. And this is the only one I'll talk about. And I should have warned you about this PowerPoint. This is death by PowerPoint. And it is designed that way. It's designed to be a reference for you. I'm not going to go through every one of the slides, I promise. But there are some sequences that you might want to go back to see if you want to get more deeply into whatever the concept is. So Level 5 Leadership, personal humility and professional will. How many of you make decisions based on your ego's need? Raise your hands if you do that. Everyone raise your hands, please. Because you really do. I mean, it's impossible that you are that selfless, that you never make a decision based on your ego's need, right? But what Collins found in his research on actually businesses that are for-profit businesses that had remained profitable, at least until the last couple of years, is that he found that these organizations were led by people who rarely made a decision primarily based on an ego need. In almost all cases, they made important decisions for their organizations based on the mission. That's the personal humility and professional will. Mad dog, we're going to accomplish this mission. That's what we're going to do. And we're going to do it in a way that inspires trust. We're going to do it in a way that gets results. And if it is at the expense of an ego need that I have, so be it. Level 5 leadership. Now, in Dufour's work on professional learning communities, he says that what organizations need to do is to move from one side of a dichotomy to the other side of a dichotomy in order to really be a professional learning community. And I want you to look at this pretty carefully and see in your experience as leaders, as professionals, paid or unpaid, just think about the organizations you work with. Where are they on each of these continua? From a focus on teaching to a focus on learning. Isn't that an interesting, this is an interesting little teeny thing to say, right? It used to be true, at least in the United States, that people felt that they were successful teachers if they presented well. And that their responsibility ended when the sound of their voice hit the student's ear. And they had no responsibility after that. Not anymore. Now people are being held accountable to what happens after that sound of a voice gets into the student's ear and then what happens as a result. So where are you in relationship to this in the organizations you're working in? Working in isolation versus working collaboratively. I think Fullen's leading the way with this thought that really you need to get people to think about their collaborative capacity, not their isolated individual capacity, which makes some great sense. From activities to results, from fixed time to flexible time, from average learning to individual learning. Now, the next one, number 6, is a really important issue. It's very, very intriguing to me. I've got a psychiatrist friend in Salt Lake. We lived there for 20 years in Salt Lake City, Utah. And it was an interesting place to live, by the way, because we're Presbyterians. And that was very intriguing living in a place that didn't have a lot of Presbyterians. 5,000 out of 2 million people. I love living there because the people in Utah live their principles. They don't just talk about their principles, they live them, whether you agree with them or not. That was kind of a cool thing about that. But one of the things that I noticed that people had a really tough time with is this notion of control. My psychiatrist friend in Salt Lake talked about the fact that where people get in trouble is on the issue of control. And when you don't feel like you have control, then that causes dilemmas for you. And the way a lot of teachers deal with that, and principals deal with that in schools, and people in school division offices deal with it, and provincial offices as well, is that they get punitive to keep control. And that may work in a very short term, but it surely doesn't work in a medium term or long term at all. So moving from punitive to positive in the environment makes sense. From teacher tell, student listen to teacher coaching, student practice makes some sense. From recognizing the elite to creating opportunities for many winners. The whole point about professional learning communities is moving from all students can learn to all students will learn. When I facilitate strategic planning now at a school division level, I start with, you've got to come up with some shared principles on which to build your mission statement. I used to let people get away with, all students can learn. Until I went to a district in the south part of the United States where the school board said, we're not going to ever say all students will learn because we get it, we'd be held accountable to the education of even those kids and the success of even those kids if we said will. Exactly. Exactly. I met a principal in Ohio who said, he was from a very elite, a small school district called Bay Village to the west side of Cleveland, Ohio, right on Lake Erie. And he said, Steve, we're not a successful high school. And he was an ex-football, big, giant guy, player. And he walked up to me and said, we're not a successful high school. I said, well, tell me about it. He said, well, only 95% of our kids are proficient. I said, well, you know, kind of in a norm reference way, that sounds pretty good. He said, we're not good because 5% of our kids are not proficient. And our teachers are so elitist that they expect that they can teach all their kids the same way, and if the kids don't learn, it's their responsibility. I want you to come in and set them straight. That's cool stuff, man. When that principal understands that only when 100% of the kids are successful, am I successful? That's the issue. So this is really where this professional learning community stuff gets tough. But that's what Dufour has come up with that I think makes so much sense. He has these 3 questions. Now there's even 4 questions since this has been written to see if you're a professional learning community. So those of you who think you are, do you know what you want kids to learn? Probably you do. Do you have a way of assessing directly when students have learned it? Yes, you do. But the 3rd question is the one that stumps people. How do you respond when kids don't learn it? He's added a 4th question now in 2009, and that 4th question is, what do you do when kids learn it too fast? Like, how do we deal with that at-risk learner? You know, the kid who is labeled sometimes gifted, but the kid who is a fast achiever. How do you deal with that as well? That defines the professional learning community. I have made myself do this through my whole career. I really love the book that's on the book list called Made to Stick by the Heaths. It's a book that says, you know, there's a lot of ideas that come and go, and then there are ideas that come and stay. Why is that true? You know you've been successful as a giant organization when the name of your organization becomes a verb when it was a noun. So when you get on the internet and you're searching in the internet, what is the verb you use for what you're doing when you're searching? I know some of you don't do that because you're going to use Bing or something else. You're going to show Google. Well, go ahead and try to show Google all you want, you know, because they have really figured this out, I think, in a beautiful way. So you Google, right? I remember when big copy machines were first on the market, and I would say I was going over to Xerox the piece of paper on a Minolta machine. That was interesting to say that. That's a made-to-stick sort of idea. What the Heaths say is something that's important for leaders, and that is you've got to make complex ideas simple without dumbing them down. You've got to make complex ideas simple without dumbing them down. If you don't do that, you will not get people to follow you. Now, I did not learn that in 30 years working for public education in the United States. I have learned it in the last 12 or so years working in the private sector. Because the private for-profit sector are experts at marketing, at turning complex ideas into simple ideas so people can grab onto them. So don't get all haughty about being, you know, if you are working in the not-for-profit sector, oh, with that, you know, I would never care about anything about profit. Really? You care about learning? That's profit. Do you care about people following good ideas? That's marketing.